The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild feels like a revolution for Nintendo's revered series.
Breath of the Wild is a return to this philosophy, in many ways, a modern vision of Zelda 1.
Breath of the Wild is one of my favorite games of all time.
And so, many years later, Zelda, restored to original form, reawakens at the Shrine of Resurrection.
Open your eyes.
Almost 9 years ago, at E3 2014, we were given the first ever look at a brand new Zelda game for the Wii U, the first slated original Zelda game for Nintendo's new tablet console hybrid. Some of A.G. Aonuma's first words about this brand new experience were about how difficult it was creating one whole world that felt connected. Previously, the large lands of Hyrule were segmented areas all directly interconnected with each other. In fact, the first imagery we ever saw was Link sat on a horse, looking out into a gigantic open field. From the outset, Nintendo really wanted to drive home that this was breaking a lot of traditions that had come to be associated with the Legend of Zelda franchise. Although slated for an ambiguous 2015 release, it wouldn't be until 2017, after many delays and speculations, that the game would finally release alongside Nintendo's new leap in technology, the Switch. Two massive changes next to each other for the big N. In the lead up to Breath of the Wild's release, I was skeptical. In fact, I was dreading the game coming out. 2017 was during a peak of open world saturation, dominated by Ubisoft's design philosophy. As a lifelong Zelda fan who got every game since Majora's Mask on release, it felt weird to not be excited about a new game from my all-time favorite franchise. Maybe Skyward Sword burnt me a little harder than I thought, or they were just moving into a direction I simply did not care about anymore. Either way, for the first time since the year 2000, I missed the launch of a Zelda game. It wasn't until maybe a week and a half after the release of Breath of the Wild, seeing the hype from friends and creators online whose opinion I trust, that I decided to grab the game for the Wii U. I wasn't nearly convinced enough to drop money on a console that had just 2 games, but the system it was built for felt like enough. While a week and a half isn't a long time, going from taking the day of release off from school, university, and then work to play a game, it felt like a lifetime. Had people already completed it? Had I missed all the hype? Turns out, at least in my circles, a lot of people also hesitated and got it around the same time as me. Only a select few took the plunge on launch. And let me tell you, that purchase is one of the best decisions I've ever made. The launch month or so was maybe one of my favorite times with the online gaming community, possibly ever. A full month of tweeting and DMing friends cryptically to try and talk about exciting things in a way that didn't spoil or reveal for anyone else. While spoiler culture can get a little out of hand, I do appreciate the secrecy in which my corner of the internet talked about their experiences. A way to know about something exciting, giving clues for which metaphorical rocks to look under without knowing what was waiting. In the 6 years since that time of secret hunting and story trading, I put around 200 hours into the game, most of which was within the first month or so, uncovering the broken world of Hyrule on the quest to restore it. And while 200 hours is a lot, it wasn't even close to scratching the surface. I'm still learning and seeing things for the first time. Games aren't defined by their graphics, mechanics, and even their narratives, so much as they are defined by the stories and memories we share with one another. So I thought I would get some friends together to share some stories from the years that were Breath of the Wild, in an attempt to celebrate and remember as we say goodbye, while also welcoming in a new era that may be Tears of the Kingdom.
Perhaps we shouldn't be surprised that, with every other change to the formula, Nintendo also decided to make Breath of the Wild the darkest Zelda.
I think one of my favorite memories from Breath of the Wild is actually right at the start, right when you get off the Great Plateau and you're in the world for the first time. I remember just feeling this sense of like exhilaration when it hit me that, oh, the game's just kind of like letting me go wherever I want. The whole world is open. And having that kind of agency was so fun and so rare in games, especially back then. Like, think about the popular open world games around that time. They were just like quest markers and like hand holding constantly. And, you know, I'm not saying all that's terrible or anything, but it definitely was a breath of fresh air to be like, oh, not only can you go anywhere, you can climb anything, you can collect stuff, there's environmental interactions. It was so fresh and so fun, and it led me to completely ignore all responsibilities I had in real life for like a week straight. I felt like a kid again, and I had this like sense of wonder, and it all started right there, right when I started just wandering around in the open world proper and getting punished for it. I remember like I came across an enemy encampment, and it was like one of those big guys, and he hit me, and I lost like my entire health bar instantly. I was like, whoa, a Zelda game where the combat is actually punishing sometimes, where it's not just like, oh, you lose a quarter of a heart from an enemy hitting you. I was like, no, I'm getting one shot. I need to actually be careful and use the tools I have and actually engage with the combat. It was awesome. I loved it. Like those opening hours, we're just kind of like scrounging for weapons and like sneaking around, and like every little piece of gear or healing item you find, like it all matters, because the game at that point is pretty punishing. And I remember like wandering around, and I think I came across like one of the first horse stables, and like it felt like such a relief hitting that horse stable, because I was like, whoa, there's NPCs, there's like a dog, there's safety, whoa. And like that feeling of safety actually meant something, because I was just getting my ass kicked by all the enemies just before them. Breath of the Wild just hit different, especially the opening hours. It was so refreshing, so engaging. Love that game.
I think everyone can agree the key to Breath of the Wild's success was its willingness to change.
Picking one single favorite memory from Breath of the Wild seems almost like an impossible task, as there are so many moments that stick out to me. But one thing that is especially memorable from my time playing Breath of the Wild is the infamous Eventide Island Shrine Quest. I found Eventide Island in the beginning of my journey by complete accident. I couldn't make it to the island at first, as I was very underleveled and I required much more stamina in order to make it across. It sat there in the distance almost teasingly, staring at me, waiting for my arrival. Completely unaware of what was to come, I eventually made my way over and was greeted with the message that stated all of my armor, weapons, and items had been taken away. I immediately felt a sense of helplessness, much like how it must actually feel to be stranded on a real deserted island. In Breath of the Wild, you spend so much of your time working on improving your weapons and clothing, so that you can become stronger against the enemies and the harsh elements and weather that are thrown your way. Eventually, you start to become almost comfortable fighting enemies, as you feel that safety net from your stronger armor, weapons, and abilities. Eventide, however, takes all of that progress, aside from your health and stamina level, and essentially throws it out the window, no longer letting you rely on a strong sword to keep you safe from harm. This island side quest brought me right back to how I felt at the very beginning of the game, where Link wakes up with no clothes on his back, no weapons, and no clue where he is or where to go. You must scavenge anything you can possibly find on this tiny island, all while enemies attack and hazardous conditions weigh you down. Some of the enemies on the island can rip you to shreds if you are not careful, which unfortunately I learned very quickly as I died quite a few times. Similarly, the DLC content for the game, Trial of the Sword, is another situation where Link is stripped of his weapons, armor, and abilities, and must fight a gauntlet of enemies with whatever he can scavenge in order to progress forward. This challenge of both quests, both Sword Trials and Eventide, really stand out in my memory because they are not only a great challenge, but the satisfaction you feel when you are able to finally complete them is everything. Overall, Breath of the Wild is a game that is worth exploring. There are challenges around every corner, and it is completely up to the player on how they wish to approach said challenges. Since every player chooses a different path, every single playthrough, whether it be your first or your 10th, will be a brand new and memorable experience. That sense of wonder, challenge, and exploration are all what make Breath of the Wild my favorite 3D Legend of Zelda game, and one of my favorite games of all time. Did it! I did it! I did it!
In everything you do within the world of Breath of the Wild, there's always that sense of space.
So my favorite memory with Breath of the Wild has got to be the Tarrytown quest. I've always had an affinity with the villages of Legend of Zelda. There's something about the rustic nature of the interiors and architecture that really speaks to the kind of slow living lifestyle that the inhabitants have. Which is also kind of impressive considering that most Zelda games, if not all, there's some sort of threat. But it's also sweet that people are just still living. They're almost like accepting of it. Like in Majora's Mask, I mean, the whole moon's coming down, right? And everyone's still preparing for their little festival or something, but it kind of shows this, I guess, acceptance of bad things happening, but not just crumbling in the face of it. Out of all of my hours with Breath of the Wild, I would say that that one side quest is pretty much what I mostly remember. But basically with the side quest, you help someone build a town. And it starts off quite bare bones, it's just like a little platform almost. And you go out and cut down trees for logs and get some rupees as well. And you also find people who can live in the town. So I think there was like a tailor, a priest, a merchant as well. But the thing is, as the town's built and it progresses, there's a change in the soundtrack. So the Tarry Town theme will go from quite simplistic to then being very full at the end. Because each time you bring a new character to live there, they add their own instrument and flavour to the music. And in general, this town building segment is a lot more intimate than in other games where you might have something similar. You get to know all these characters, you watch it being built from the ground up. And at the very end of it, there's a wedding ceremony. And of course, you get to use the facilities in this town now. So you kind of see how Link's actions really help people on an individual basis. And I think that's something to be said about a lot of the side quests in the series. You do get to see more of the details that exist. So with Tears of the Kingdom, I really hope they continue to kind of show us more about life in Hyrule and get to know more of the people there and build an actual connection with these villagers, as opposed to them just being the backdrop. It's nice to see Link not just in a position of a hero, but also a member of a community. And it also gives you more of a drive to protect these people. So yeah, Tears of the Kingdom, please have more side quests and cute villages. Thank you very much.
For The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Nintendo used an open world for a very specific purpose, to let players go on an adventure.
The Breath of the Wild, for me, was a game that really grew on me over time. When I first played it, I didn't connect with it straight away. I'm a story lover, right? And Breath of the Wild's sparse kind of spreading out of story moments kind of had me feeling a little bit disconnected from everything at first. But the more I played it and the longer I spent with it, and even the time that I had away from it, I started to think of it really fondly. When it comes to like a favorite moment, my favorite moment was actually during a playthrough that I was recording, it was just after I'd watched an interview with the developers, and one of the developers said that their favorite element of the game was how well they feel like they captured wind. They captured kind of the feeling of wind and the sound of wind kind of blowing around the player as they play. And this really intrigued me. I'm like, okay, well, there's been clearly a real focus on nature and capturing a sense of like trying to capture or create a sense that the world is alive and living and breathing. And so I started this playthrough trying to keep my mind open and my ears open to the nature around me and just paying more attention to what the developers were trying to do. And there was this one moment where I climbed to the top of the cliff, and this is on the Great Plateau in like the beginning kind of tutorial stage. And not only was there this beautiful like moment where the wind was blowing up on top of this cliff, but there was this one flute note that played. It was like this elongated note that a flute was playing, at least I think it was a flute. And that just really caught me off guard. I was like, whoa, like there's not this overpowering kind of musical theme trying to push me in an emotional direction. This was just this like little flute just kind of adding to the ambience and the feeling of being up high on this cliff. that flute was amazing. And that just really caught me off guard, and I kind of fell in love with the minimalism of it, and it kind of made me pay a bit more attention to what the music was doing. And I think as much as they were, focusing on creating a world that was alive and living through ambient sound effects, they were also doing that with the music. So that was something that really stuck with me. My second favorite moment actually over the last few years after I finished playing through the story and I was having a bit of a break from Breath of the Wild, was watching my daughter play it. So she started playing it when she was about 5, and when she first started playing, she was learning how to do the controls, controlling Link and the camera at the same time, and doing all that stuff. And watching her over the years get better and better at controlling Link and starting to get more courage to go fight enemies. But what she ended up doing was her favorite pastime became like collecting horses. So she would love kind of dressing up in camouflage, like all green, like the green Tingle outfit with like the Korok mask, and sneaking up to these groups of horses and capturing the one that she kind of fell in love with the most. And she would tame it and take it back to the stable, give it a name, get its like the bond up to max, and then like dress it up and give it new hairstyles and stuff, and then just do it again. And that was her Breath of the Wild experience. It wasn't story, it wasn't challenges, the stuff that I, as an adult, having grown up with Zelda games, the stuff I appreciate are like the challenges. She appreciated the downtime. She appreciated the simplicity and like the ability to express herself in her play style. And I think what's rad about Breath of the Wild is that it accommodated for so many different play styles, so many different player expressions, And yeah, so she would just collect horses. And so even when she jumps on now, she would just pick up the controller, go find an open field with horses and collect horses and name them and dress them and then do it again.
Following the precedent set with Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild soundtrack is full of real, live recorded instruments, adding a nice physicality to the score.
To close out, I'd like to share my favourite memory with Breath of the Wild. Within the first few hours of exploring the land below the Great Plateau, I was wandering around the area of Lake Hylia. And while I was just sort of middling about seeing what I could interact with, a bright green movement caught the corner of my eye, so I turned to face it, only to see the giant green dragon Farosh rising into the sky. On paper, this moment isn't all that special, and honestly what happens with the dragons is even less so. But something about seeing a gigantic unknown entity soaring the sky was so awe-inspiring. There was nothing hinting at this in any promotional material, and no one had spoiled it for me leading in. So this moment was such a standout to me because it was maybe the most unexpected. It speaks a lot to what a sense of mystery can do to a game's moments, because even the most simple can stand out. But the little bit for me that made it extra special was that window of cryptic messaging I mentioned at the top of this video. Me and fellow YouTuber Wizardwat were exchanging stories, and we were in a hype all caps typing back and forth about super exciting things that happened to us. And after around 10 minutes we came to the conclusion we were both excited about seeing the same dragon in the same place. That conversation about this game will always be special to me. It serves as my constant reminder of just what that moment in time was like. And that games themselves can be special, but not only that, it's the stories we share around each other that can help shape the experience we have. 6 years is a long time with a game, especially one that isn't a live service game. Considering the last content update for Breath of the Wild was at the end of 2017, it says a lot that the game has maintained its popularity consistently over the years, with new discoveries from speedrunning tech to interactions with the different systems, and videos going viral ushering in new players who may have remained hesitant over the years. It's not surprising that it has been by a large margin the most successful Zelda game of all time, selling 30 million units, eclipsing the second highest Twilight Princess at 9 million. It's no wonder Tears of the Kingdom has been made on top of the foundation of what came before it. I'm excited to see what the future may hold for The Legend of Zelda. I know I said this is goodbye, but I think with a game like this, it might just be see you later.